Sri Lanka's Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, who assumed office in May, explained the monumental task he faced in pivoting an economy he said was heading for rock bottom. Ranil and President Gotabaya Rajapaksa agreed to resign during mounting pressure from protesters who stormed their residences and set fire to one of them. This is so disastrous. Sri Lankans are skipping meals, and they've been enduring shortages and lining up for several hours to try to buy scarce fuel. The economy is harsh on them, and it's such a sad reality for a country whose economy had been growing quickly, with a growing and comfortable middle class, not until they experienced this latest deepened crisis. However, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky blamed Russia for causing unrest in Sri Lanka and around the world due to the blocking of food products during the invasion of Ukraine. But you should also know that Russia isn't the only reason behind the Sri Lankan crisis. China also has a hand in this. In today's video, we'll discuss the major reason behind Sri Lanka's bankruptcy and the involvement of China in this crisis. So watch this video to the end because it's gonna be pretty interesting. Since Sri Lanka gained independence in 1948, they had never been in this unfavorable situation. They're currently suffering its worst economic crisis since gaining independence, which comes on the heels of successive waves of COVID-19 threatening to undo years of development. We can note that the oil supply shortage has forced government offices and even schools to close until further notice. There's now a lack of foreign exchange reserves, local currency depreciation, and even reduced domestic agricultural production, which have fueled the shortages. All right, there's this major trick Russia has used in their invasion of Ukraine, the creation of something we call an economic shock. Also, many countries are experiencing fuel and food shortages due to the disruption in the supply chain, and most of these countries have benefited from Russia's agenda. But how does it all get worse for Sri Lanka? During a recent address at the Asian Leadership Conference in Seoul, Zelensky said shocking food and fuel price hikes led to a social explosion. No one knows how it will end. But there's still more to this. Yes, and this is coming from China. It may sound surprising as to how China got involved, but hear this. While Sri Lankan faces its worst economic crisis since independence with food and fuel shortages, China has pretended not to notice anything, which is not the issue. They shifted the blame to the borrower. The country was trying to rebuild its economy during the pandemic, but the tourism industry was hit badly. It was obvious that Sri Lanka needed help, and of course they turned to China for help and asked for a loan of $1 billion to meet repayments and a $1.5 billion credit line to buy Chinese goods. Well, the bad news is that their request wasn't even noticed by the Chinese government, as no progress was attained even after months of negotiations. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe is well aware of the depth to which China has penetrated the island nation. As the port struggled to gain momentum, Beijing wanted it as a collateral, compelling the Sri Lankan government to hand over management to a Chinese corporation on a 99-year lease in 2017. Well, we can't dispute the fact that Sri Lanka has achieved economic growth through external borrowings for a very long time, and of course, China has been one of the major creditors to the country. China's model of economic development adopted for Sri Lanka included a handful of Chinese companies that invest in specific projects, including higher interest rates and agreements to govern such investments. China's blind eye to the economic and political condition of Sri Lanka allowed the spread of corruption and endemic borrowing. The country has made hostage to Chinese investments, which worsened the structural weaknesses in the economy and contributed to the current crisis. This is not the only reason. All right, let's dwell on this for a sec. Globally, the price of grain has been increasing around the globe, and there's surely no doubt stemming from China's actions. It is evident that China hoards much of the world's grain. This may not sound well to other developing countries because when this happens, there will be more demand for whatever grain is left in the global market. Definitely, if you buy products at an inflated price, you can expect to sell them lower than how you purchase them. That is where the problem sets in. This results in countries paying it at inflated prices. Where it begins to get worrisome is that as several countries import grain at inflated prices, they will also sell it to their citizens at more inflated prices. Since they are developing countries, their citizens will always struggle to get them, or they may not even be able to afford them. What can be sadder than this? A vivid example was how the international wheat prices rose for a fourth consecutive month, up 5.6% in May to an average of 56.2%, above their value last year. As long as we have other factors affecting the Sri Lanka crisis, such as Ukraine, we just can't dispute and ignore China's role in this crisis. As long as China keeps hoarding a handful of grain, this will keep getting traumatized, especially for the developing countries. Of course, it has affected Sri Lanka too severely because this is making the remaining meager supply of grain very scarce and expensive. Sadly, there are now significantly higher prices in products, and we should expect these increases to continue. Only time will tell when this crisis will end. Well, that's it for today, guys. If you enjoyed this video, do well to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.